What happens when a billionaire's hands start trembling over a cup of coffee? Not because of a stock market crash, not because his company is failing, but because a waitress mentioned her dead father's old book. The coffee spilled across the table in Eddie's Corner Diner that October night. Richard Calloway, CEO of a $3 billion manufacturing empire, went pale. His expensive suit, his silver hair, his decades of corporate control, none of it mattered anymore. 5 words had just shattered everything he'd built over 33 years. This is how a casual remark about a leather-bound journal unraveled 3 murders, exposed a family fortune built on stolen dreams, and revealed the conspiracy that had been hiding in plain sight since 1985. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a true story about a man who erased his own identity to expose the truth, about a daughter who inherited more than grief, and about what happens when the past crawls out of its grave demanding justice. By the time Rachel Morgan understood what her father had really written in that journal, 2 more people would be dead. She'd be running for her life, and she'd be holding evidence that could send her own blood relative to prison for the rest of his life. But on October 15, 2018, at 10:47 p.m., Rachel didn't know any of that yet. She was just a 29-year-old waitress finishing another double shift, her feet aching, her tips barely enough to cover rent. She was just making small talk with a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong neighborhood. She had no idea that the man in the corner booth had been searching for that book for 33 years. And she had no idea he wasn't the only one looking for it. South Philadelphia had a particular smell at night. Exhaust fumes mixed with corner store rotisserie chicken, underlaid with a perpetual scent of asphalt that never quite dried. Eddie's Corner Diner added its own notes to this urban perfume: burnt coffee, fryer grease, and the faint metallic tang of industrial dishwashing soap. Rachel Morgan had stopped noticing most of it 2 years ago. The fryer grease had seeped into her uniform so deeply that 3 washes couldn't kill the smell. It had become her second skin, a badge of the working poor that she wore whether she wanted to or not. 10:47 p.m. 13 minutes until closing. Her feet screamed inside shoes that should have been replaced 6 months ago. But $847 in her checking account didn't leave room for luxuries like comfort. The medical debt from her father's death ate everything else. $47,000 and counting. Because dying in America was expensive even when you did it quickly. The last 3 customers sat scattered across Eddie's worn booths. An elderly man nursing decaf and doing a crossword puzzle. 2 college kids splitting a plate of fries, making it last. Nobody who'd leave a tip worth remembering. Rachel wiped down the counter for the 4th time that hour. Her mind already 3 blocks away in her studio apartment. $1,100 a month for 400 square feet, and a radiator that clanked like it had ghosts trapped inside. She was always one emergency away from eviction. 1 car repair, 1 unexpected illness, 1 anything. Her father's leather journal sat on her bookshelf at home, exactly where she'd placed it after the funeral 2 years ago. She'd never opened it, couldn't bear to. David Morgan had spent every spare moment writing in that thing, promising it would change their lives. It hadn't. It had just been another dream that died with him, leaving Rachel with nothing but debt and the bitter taste of inherited failure. She remembered him at their old kitchen table, hunched over the journal by lamplight, pen scratching across pages like he was carving truth into stone. "This will change everything for us, Rachel," he'd said, eyes bright with certainty. "This story, what I'm documenting, it matters. People need to know." She'd believed him once, back when she was 19 and still enrolled at community college, back when she thought she'd be a teacher someday, back when the future felt like something she could actually reach. That was before the medical bills, before the double shifts, before she learned that dreams were luxuries reserved for people who could afford to fail. Now she was 29, and the only thing she'd inherited from her father was his capacity for disappointment. He died chasing impossible dreams of being a published writer. She was going to die serving coffee to people who didn't see her as human. The bell above the door chimed. Rachel glanced up, already forming her closing time apology, and froze. The man who walked in didn't belong. Not in Eddie's diner, not in this neighborhood, not in any world Rachel Morgan inhabited. His suit was charcoal gray with a subtle sheen that whispered money. His silver hair was cut with surgical precision. His shoes probably cost more than her rent. But it wasn't any of that which made Rachel's breath catch. It was his hands. She'd remember later that she noticed his hands first. Not because they were manicured, though they were. Not because they wore a watch worth more than her annual salary, though that was also true. She noticed them because they were shaking. A man who wore power like a second skin, a man who clearly commanded boardrooms and bent reality to his will, had hands that trembled like autumn leaves in a storm. He slid into the corner booth, the same booth her father had claimed every Sunday, the same booth where David Morgan had written his precious stories that no one would ever read, and those shaking hands wrapped around the laminated menu like it was a life preserver. Rachel grabbed the coffee pot, her Waitress autopilot kicking in despite the strangeness of the moment. Something about this man felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, but significant, like the air right before lightning strikes. She had no idea that in 3 minutes, 5 words would destroy everything she thought she knew about her father, her life, and the thin line between survival and truth. Up close, the man looked like he'd been carved from expensive marble and left out in the rain too long. His face was all sharp angles and careful control, the kind of face that had made 1,000 difficult decisions and lived with every one of them. Silver hair swept back from a high forehead, eyes the color of steel in winter, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile somewhere around 1995. He was maybe 60, maybe older. Wealth had a way of preserving people, pickling them in premium healthcare and low stress. Coffee? Rachel asked, the pot already tilting toward his cup. He nodded, but said nothing, just watched her pour with an intensity that made her skin prickle. His eyes weren't on her exactly. They were scanning the diner like a man searching for ghosts in the grease stains. Rachel stepped back, waiting for him to order food, to ask for cream, to do anything normal. He did none of those things. Just sat there, hands wrapped around the coffee cup, staring at nothing. The silence stretched, uncomfortable. Eddie's was never quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The ancient radio behind the counter played soft rock at barely audible volume. But this silence was different. Heavy. Long day? Rachel finally asked, because small talk was part of the uniform, just like the grease smell. The man looked up at her, really looked, and something in his expression cracked. Long, 33 years. The honesty of it startled her. Customers didn't talk like that. They complained about traffic, about their boss, about the weather. They didn't hand you pieces of their soul over burnt coffee in a dying diner. Rachel found herself laughing. Tired, bitter, understanding. I get that. My father used to say the same thing. Felt like his whole life was one long day that never ended. Your father? The man's voice sharpened with sudden interest. Yeah, he died 2 years ago. Heart attack. The words came automatically now, worn smooth by repetition. He was chasing impossible dreams right up until the end. Spent every spare moment in this exact booth, actually, writing in this old leather journal. Thought he'd be the next Steinbeck or something. The coffee cup in the man's hands began to tremble. Not a little shake. A violent tremor that sent black liquid sloshing toward the rim. Rachel watched confused, as the color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His breath caught, audible sharp like he'd been punched. He wrote about factory workers. Rachel continued, not understanding the reaction, but unable to stop talking. About dignity in labor. About how America breaks its own people. Real poetic stuff. Never got published, though. Just another dream that died with him. The coffee cup hit the saucer with a clatter. The man's hands were shaking so badly, now he had to pull them back, press them flat against the table. That was my brother's book. The words came out as a whisper, hoarse and desperate. Rachel's brain stuttered. I'm sorry, what? Your father. The journal. The stories about workers. The man leaned forward, his steel gray eyes boring into hers. That was my brother's book, his dream, his words. The diner seemed to tilt on its axis. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, insistent, angry. The smell of burnt coffee became overwhelming. Rachel gripped the counter to steady herself, the coffee pot suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds in her other hand. My father's name was David Morgan, she said slowly, like she was explaining basic math to a child. He was a factory worker. He lived in South Philadelphia his entire life. My brother's name was Thomas Calloway. The man's voice gained strength, certainty flooding back. He was a brilliant writer, and in 1985, he disappeared after a family fight. We never heard from him again. Rachel set the coffee pot down before she dropped it. You're saying my father was your brother? That's insane. Is it? The man pulled out his wallet, extracted a photograph yellowed with age, slid it across the table. This is Thomas in 1984. He was 26. Rachel looked down at the photo and felt the floor drop away beneath her feet. The man in the picture could have been her father's twin. Same dark hair, same angular jaw, same intense eyes that seemed to see through cameras into something beyond. He wore a college sweatshirt and held a notebook mid-laugh, caught in a moment of pure joy. Oh my God, Rachel breathed. Your father's name was David Morgan? The man pressed. Rachel nodded, unable to form words. My brother's name was Thomas Calloway, but I think I know he became your father. The man's hands had stopped shaking now, replaced by rigid control. I've been searching for him for 33 years, and you just told me exactly where he's been. Questions exploded in Rachel's mind, colliding and fragmenting. Why would he change his name? Why hide from his family? What was he running from? What did this mean about everything she thought she knew about her father? I need to see that journal, the man said, and it wasn't a request, not want, need. Because if your father was really Thomas, then that book contains something my family has been searching for since the day he disappeared. He paused, his next words deliberate and terrifying. Something worth killing for. Killing for? Rachel took a step back. What are you talking about? The man glanced toward the diner window, his body tensing. He checked his watch, then looked back at Rachel with an urgency that made her pulse spike. We need to leave. Now. He stood, pulling out his wallet again, throwing $300 bills on the table. Before they realize I found you. Before who realizes? I don't even know who you are. My name is Richard Calloway. He moved toward the door, every muscle coiled like a spring. And if I'm right about what your father wrote in that journal, we're both in danger. Because the people who've been looking for it don't leave witnesses. Rachel's feet felt bolted to the floor. This was insane. This was a stranger spinning conspiracy theories in a diner at midnight. This was, your father died of a heart attack, Richard said, stopping at the door. Are you certain it was natural? And just like that, doubt crawled into Rachel's chest and made a home there. Rachel's mind screamed stranger danger. Every true crime podcast she'd ever listened to, every news report about women who disappeared after trusting the wrong person, every instinct honed by years of late-night shifts in a city that didn't forgive mistakes. But Richard Calloway wasn't moving toward her. He was moving toward the door, his expensive shoes clicking against linoleum that had seen better decades. And the question he'd asked hung in the air like smoke. Are you certain it was natural? The doctors had said stress. David Morgan, 56 years old, relatively healthy despite decades of factory work, just dropped at a station on a Tuesday afternoon. Heart gave out. These things happen. Except her father had been terrified in those last few weeks. Rachel remembered now, the memory surfacing like something drowning, finally breaking the surface. He'd been looking over his shoulder, checking locks twice, jumping at unexpected sounds. She thought it was paranoia, grief and worry manifesting as anxiety. It had never occurred to her to think. 5 minutes, Richard said from the door. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes in my car. I'll explain everything. If you don't believe me, you walk away. But if I'm right, staying here might be the most dangerous thing you've ever done. Rachel looked at the elderly man with his crossword. The college kids finishing their fries. None of them were paying attention. If she screamed, they'd probably help. Probably. She grabbed her jacket from behind the counter. 5 minutes. Then I'm on. Richard's Mercedes was parked 2 blocks away, tucked into shadows between streetlights. The walk there felt like miles. Every sound, a siren in the distance, footsteps behind them, the rattle of a garbage truck, made Rachel's heart hammer. Inside the car, the difference between their worlds became suffocating. Leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The kind of silence that only expensive engineering could buy. A smell that was nothing like the diner. Clean, subtle, wealthy. Richard started the engine, but didn't drive. Just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, gathering something. Courage, maybe. or just the weight of 3 decades of secrets? In 1985, Callaway Industries was a mid-sized manufacturing company. He began, his voice low and measured. My father had died 2 years earlier. My oldest brother, Robert, became CEO. I was COO. Thomas, the youngest, he was supposed to join the family business, but he wanted to write, wanted to tell stories. Robert thought it was a waste of his Harvard education. Rachel listened, her body pressed against the passenger door, one hand on the handle. Escape route maintained. Thomas worked in the patent division for a year, just long enough to discover something. Richard's jaw tightened. We were stealing, not just one patent, but dozens. Small companies would develop something innovative, a new manufacturing process, a better tool design, and Robert would have our lawyers bury them in litigation until they went bankrupt. Then we'd buy their patents for pennies and claim the innovation as ours. That's illegal, Rachel said. Very. Richard's laugh was bitter. Thomas found documents, falsified paperwork, bribes to city inspectors, designs stolen from competitors. He confronted Robert, said he was going to expose everything, right about it, make sure the world knew what we'd built our fortune on. What happened? Robert threatened him. Richard's knuckles went white on the steering wheel, said if Thomas destroyed the family, he'd have nothing. No money, no connections, no future. That we'd erase him completely. Thomas packed a bag and left that night. We never heard from him again. The story hung between them, heavy with implication. Rachel's mind raced, connecting dots she didn't want to see. And you? I chose my brother Robert over my brother Thomas. The confession came out hollow, rehearsed from years of self-recrimination. I helped cover up Thomas's disappearance, told everyone he'd just left needed to find himself, would come back eventually. And I watched Callaway Industries grow into a $3 billion empire built on the foundation of those stolen patents. Why are you telling me this? Richard finally turned to look at her. His eyes held something Rachel recognized from her own mirror. The exhaustion of carrying guilt too heavy to bear. Because before Thomas left, he told me something. He said, I'm writing everything down. Every patent we stole, every family we destroyed, every bribe Robert paid. One day the truth will matter. Rachel's breath caught. The journal? If that journal contains what I think it does, it's evidence of 30 years of corporate fraud, racketeering, possibly manslaughter. Richard's voice dropped. Companies whose owners committed suicide after we destroyed them. Neighborhoods poisoned by our factories cutting environmental corners. Workers who died because we eliminated safety protocols to save money. My father was a factory worker, Rachel said, but her voice lacked conviction now. He wrote stories about ordinary people. He wasn't investigating anything. He was just. What factory did he work at? The question landed like a punch. Rachel's mouth went dry. Callaway Industries, Department C assembly line. Richard's bitter laugh filled the car. He worked for us, under our noses, for 30 years. That's not coincidence, Rachel. That's investigation. He changed his name, became invisible, and documented everything from inside. The pieces fit. Rachel didn't want them to, but they fit. Her father's paranoia, his obsessive writing, the way he talked about dignity and justice like they were tangible things he could capture in ink, his promise that the story mattered, that it would change everything. He hadn't been writing fiction. He'd been writing evidence. Richard's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, checked the screen, and all the color drained from his face again. We have a problem. His voice went flat, dangerous. My nephew, Robert's son, Vincent, he's had people watching me. He knows I came to Philadelphia. He knows I went to that diner. So what? Rachel's hand tightened on the door handle. So 3 people who knew Thomas have died in the last 5 years. Richard turned to her, and she saw fear in his eyes for the first time. Real primal fear. All ruled accidents. A car crash. A fall downstairs. A home invasion gone wrong. All within weeks of trying to contact me about my brother. Rachel's blood turned to ice. You think they were murdered? I think Vincent has been cleaning up loose ends, making sure Thomas's secrets stay buried. Richard started the car, pulling into traffic. And I think the moment you mentioned that journal in a diner at closing time, you became a loose end. The city lights blurred past the windows. Rachel's apartment, her job, her small, safe life. All of it felt suddenly like a cardboard set that could be knocked over with a breath. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Boston. I have a lawyer friend who specializes in corporate whistleblowing. We need to get that journal authenticated, copied, secured. Then we go to federal authorities." "This is insane." "Yes." Richard's hands were steady on the wheel now, purpose replacing fear. "But if I'm right, your father spent 30 years documenting crimes that destroyed hundreds of lives. He died protecting that evidence. The least we can do is make sure it wasn't for nothing." Rachel pulled out her phone to call her landlord, her boss, someone. But Richard's hand shot out, stopping her. "No calls. No messages. If Vincent's people are tracking me, they're tracking you too. Everything digital leaves a trail. How do I know I can trust you?" The question finally escaped, the one she should have asked before getting in the car. Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3 decades of regret. "You don't. But I'm the only person who believes your father's story matters. And right now that might be enough." They took side streets back to Rachel's apartment, Richard checking his mirrors every 30 seconds like a man who'd learned paranoia the hard way. Rachel's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every headlight behind them felt like pursuit. Every shadow held threat. Her building stood quiet at 1:47 a.m., a 3-story walk-up that had seen better decades. Peeling paint, cracked steps, the kind of place landlords forgot about until rent was due. Rachel's studio was on the 2nd floor, sandwiched between a nursing student who worked nights and an elderly woman who complained about noise that didn't exist. 400 square feet of second-hand furniture and dreams deferred. But it was clean, organized, the one thing Rachel could control in a life that felt increasingly out of control. The journal sat exactly where she'd left it 2 years ago, on a particle board bookshelf wedged between romance novels she'd never finished and self-help books that hadn't helped. Leather-bound, palm-sized, worn soft at the edges from decades of handling. Rachel's hands shook as she retrieved it. The leather felt warm, almost alive, like it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to finally understand. Richard stood behind her, close enough that she could hear his breathing, sharp, controlled, a man fighting for composure. She opened to the first page. The handwriting hit her like a physical blow. Her father's careful script, each letter formed with the precision of someone who believed words mattered. But it was the inscription that made her knees buckle. For Rachel. "This is why I left everything. This is why it mattered. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more." Tears blurred her vision. "I thought he meant his writing dreams," she whispered. "I thought he was apologizing for being poor, for not giving me the life I deserved." Richard's hand touched her shoulder, gentle, understanding. He was apologizing for something much bigger. Rachel turned the page, and the journal revealed its true nature. This wasn't a novel. This wasn't stories about factory workers finding dignity in labor. This was a documentary record, meticulous and damning. Dates, names, patent numbers, copied documents taped to pages. Her father's handwriting cataloging each theft, each betrayal, each life destroyed. June 15th, 1985. Patent hashtag for 523-891. Stolen from Martinez Tool and Die, Seattle. Roberto Martinez spent his life savings developing the process. Robert Calloway filed identical patent 2 months later. Martinez's company bankrupt by December. Page after page. 14 stolen patents documented between 1985 and 1987 alone. But it went deeper. Testimonials from workers who'd been fired for asking questions. Statements from engineers who'd been threatened into silence. Notes from conversations overheard, meetings witnessed, documents photographed. Photos tucked between pages showed Robert Calloway, older, harder looking than Richard, meeting with city officials. In one, cash envelopes sat visible on a restaurant table. In another, he shook hands with a man Rachel's father had labeled Inspector Morrison. $50K to ignore environmental violations, 1989. Bank account numbers filled entire pages. Shell company names. Money trails that wound through offshore accounts and dummy corporations. Richard leaned over her shoulder, reading, and she heard his breath catch. When he spoke, his voice carried horror and vindication in equal measure. This is worse than I imagined. Robert didn't just steal patents. He destroyed lives systematically. He pointed to an entry from 1993, his finger trembling slightly. Look at this. The Henderson family. They owned a small tool and die shop in Pittsburgh, developed a new manufacturing process that would have revolutionized precision metalwork. Robert stole it, then buried them in frivolous lawsuits until they went bankrupt. Rachel read her father's note beneath. James Henderson committed suicide in 1995. Wife and 3 children lost their home. Oldest daughter had to drop out of college. Also, Robert Calloway could add another $1 million to his fortune. My father documented everything, Rachel said, and pride surged through her grief. He was brave. He was extraordinary, Richard agreed. But questions crowded Rachel's mind, demanding answers. Why didn't he go to the police? Why spend 30 years hiding when he had all this evidence? Because the Calloways own half the police department, Richard said quietly. Robert made sure of that. Campaign contributions, charitable donations to police unions, judgeships for friendly prosecutors. Thomas couldn't trust local authorities. He was waiting for enough evidence to go federal, to make the case so airtight that money and influence couldn't bury it. Rachel kept reading. Her father had been thorough to the point of obsession. He'd documented environmental violations that poisoned neighborhoods, safety shortcuts that led to worker deaths, bribery schemes that reached into state government, and threaded through it all, a father's voice talking to a daughter he loved. Rachel turned 8 today. Took her to the museum. She wants to be a teacher. I hope this work means she'll live in a world where truth matters more than power. The grief was a living thing now, clawing at Rachel's chest. If this is real, if people died over this, her voice broke. What does that mean for me? Richard didn't answer. Didn't need to. The weight of inheritance hung between them, not money or property, but danger and responsibility. Rachel flipped toward the end of the journal, looking for her father's final entries. But something was wrong. The pages went from March 2016 to blank. Not blank at the end, as if he'd simply stopped writing. Blank because pages had been torn out. Ragged edges remained, evidence of violence done to her father's careful documentation. I don't remember these pages being torn, Rachel said, ice flooding her veins. Richard moved closer, examining the damage. When did your father die? March 2016. Heart attack at work. And you're certain you were the first person in his apartment afterward? Richard's voice had gone cold, analytical. You collected his things? No one else had access. Rachel's mind raced backward. The hospital had called her at work. She'd rushed there, but he was already gone. Then she'd gone to his apartment to gather clothes for the funeral. And she'd left the door unlocked, only for 20 minutes while she'd run back to her car for boxes. The apartment complex wasn't secure. Anyone could have walked in. Someone took the missing pages, she whispered, before I even knew to look for them. The question is who, Richard said, and what was on them that was worth removing. 3 sharp raps at the door cut through the room, like gunshots. Rachel and Richard froze. The only sound was Rachel's heart hammering against her ribs, so loud she was certain whoever stood outside could hear it. Rachel Morgan? A male voice, professional and cold. This is Detective Chun, Philadelphia Police. I need to ask you some questions about your father's death. Rachel's eyes met Richard's. His face had gone pale, his earlier confidence evaporating. The knock came again, harder, more insistent. Ms. Morgan, I know you're in there. I just need a few minutes of your time. Richard's hand moved to his phone, finger hovering over 911, but he didn't press it. Something in his expression said he knew. Calling the police wouldn't help when the police might already be compromised. Rachel moved toward the door, her legs feeling disconnected from her body. Through the peephole, she saw a man in his 40s, Asian American, sharp suit, sharper eyes. He held up a badge, gold gleaming under the hallway's fluorescent light. Everything about him screamed legitimate. Everything except the timing. What do I do? Rachel mouthed to Richard. Richard's jaw set. He straightened, pulling on the CEO persona like armor, and nodded. Rachel opened the door. Detective Chen stood in her doorway like he owned it. Not aggressive, but confident in a way that made Rachel's skin crawl. His suit was tailored, expensive. His badge looked real. His eyes looked dead. "Ms. Morgan, thank you for opening the door." His smile didn't reach those dead eyes. "I apologize for the late hour, but there have been some new developments in your father's case. We're reopening the investigation." Rachel's throat felt lined with sandpaper. Investigation? It was a heart attack. "We have reason to believe otherwise." Chen's gaze slid past her to Richard, and something flickered in those cold eyes. Recognition. "Mr. Calloway, this is interesting. What brings the CEO of Calloway Industries to Ms. Morgan's apartment at 2 in the morning?" Richard stepped forward, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Power meeting power. "On whose authority is this investigation being reopened, Detective?" "Philadelphia Police Department, Homicide Division." Chen pulled out a small notebook, flipped it open with theatrical precision. "We've received new information suggesting David Morgan's death wasn't natural." "What new information?" Rachel asked, but her voice came out thin and reedy. Chen's smile widened. "That's what I'd like to discuss. May I come in?" Every instinct Rachel had screamed no, but Richard nodded, stepping aside. Chen entered the studio like he was cataloging evidence. His eyes swept across the room. The second-hand furniture, the particle board bookshelf, the journal lying open on the coffee table. He saw it. Rachel knew he saw it. His gaze lingered for just a fraction too long before moving on. "So," Chen said, settling into Rachel's only chair without being invited. "Ms. Morgan, when was the last time you spoke with your father before his death?" "The night before. On the phone." Rachel remained standing, Richard beside her, forming an unconscious, united front. "And did he seem agitated? Afraid?" "He seemed like he always did. Tired. Distracted." "Distracted by what?" Chen pulled out a pen, poised to write. Richard's hand touched Rachel's elbow, a warning. "Don't say too much." "His writing," Rachel said carefully. "He was always writing." Chen nodded, wrote something down. The scratch of pen on paper sounded too loud. "And after his death, did you notice anything unusual? Papers missing? His apartment disturbed?" The question was too specific, too knowing. Richard's voice cut through the tension. "Detective Chen, I'm curious. You said Homicide Division. What evidence suggests David Morgan was murdered?" Chen looked up, and the mask finally slipped. Just for a moment, but long enough. His smile turned cold. Professional courtesy replaced by something harder. "I'm not at liberty to discuss an ongoing investigation, Mr. Calloway. But I'm sure you understand corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets. These situations can become dangerous." "Trade secrets," Richard repeated, his tone carefully neutral. "What would a factory worker have to do with trade secrets?" Jim closed his notebook, set down his pen. When he spoke again, the pretense was gone entirely. "Gentlemen, lady, let's stop playing games." He reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a wallet. Not the badge again. A business card. He tossed it on the coffee table next to the journal. Rachel read it. Her stomach turned to ice. Chen Security Solutions. Private investigation and asset recovery. "I'm not with Philadelphia PD, Chen said, his voice losing all warmth. "I'm private security. I work for Vincent Calloway." Richard's face could have been carved from stone. "My nephew sent you. Mr. Vincent Calloway is concerned about family legacy. He's aware that certain documentation may exist regarding historical business practices." Chen leaned forward, his dead eyes fixing on Rachel. "He wants a journal, Ms. Morgan, and he's willing to pay very generously for it. $500,000. Cash. Tonight." The number hit Rachel like a freight train. $500,000. Enough to erase every cent of medical debt. Enough to finish school. Enough to escape the diner, the studio apartment, the grinding poverty that had defined her entire adult life. "Walk away tonight," Chen continued, his voice smooth as silk. "Forget this whole thing. Start over somewhere new. California, maybe. Florida. Anywhere you want. You're young. You deserve a life that isn't chained to your father's mistakes." The offer was seductive. Rachel felt it pulling at her, tempting her with the promise of freedom she'd never known. She was so tired, Tired of double shifts. Tired of choosing between eating and paying electric bills. Tired of watching her life drain away in a diner that didn't care if she lived or died. If you give him that journal, Richard said quietly, you're signing your own death warrant. Vincent won't leave witnesses. Chen's expression didn't change. Mr. Calloway is paranoid, as wealthy men often are. Vincent simply wants to protect his family's legacy. There's no need for dramatics. By destroying evidence of crimes, Richard's voice shook with suppressed rage. By continuing the cover-up that cost my brother everything, that's protection. That's pragmatism. Chen stood, straightening his jacket. Ms. Morgan, I'm authorized to go as high as $750,000. But the offer expires in 10 minutes. After that, Mr. Vincent Calloway takes a different approach. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but crystal clear. Rachel looked at the journal, at her father's handwriting, careful and precise. At the inscription, this is why it mattered. David Morgan had died protecting this. He'd given up his name, his family, his wealth. He'd spent 30 years documenting horrors, living invisibly, waiting for the moment when truth could finally break free. And now his daughter was being offered blood money to bury it all. Rachel's hands clenched into fists. The exhaustion was still there, the poverty still crushing. But underneath it, something else burned. Something her father had given her along with his journal. Get out of my apartment, she said. Chen's smile turned cold. Reptilian. Ms. Morgan, I strongly advise you to reconsider. Get out. Chen stood slowly, like a predator deciding whether its prey was worth the effort. He pulled another business card from his pocket, placed it on the counter. In case you change your mind, the offer stands until sunrise. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about what happens next. You seem like a good person. Then he was gone, footsteps echoing down the hallway, fading into silence. Richard locked the door behind him, through the deadbolt, braced a chair against it for good measure. We need to leave. Now. Vincent won't wait. Leave and go where? Rachel's voice cracked. This is my home. Your home isn't safe anymore. None of us are. Richard grabbed his phone. I'm calling Patricia Whitmore. She's a former federal prosecutor in Boston. Specializes in corporate whistleblowing cases. We get the journal to her, get it authenticated and copied. Then we go to the FBI. Not local police. Not Philadelphia authorities. Federal, where Calloway money has less reach. Rachel nodded numbly, started throwing clothes into a backpack. Toiletries. Her father's journal wrapped in a sweater for protection. Richard was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Patricia, it's Richard Calloway. I need your help. I'm bringing you evidence of corporate fraud going back 30 years. Yes, Calloway Industries. My brother's documentation. I'll explain when we get there. Rachel zipped the backpack, turned to grab her laptop from her desk, and stopped. The laptop was open. She'd left it closed. She was obsessive about it. Closed laptop, unplugged charger. Everything shut down to save electricity. She never left it open. Richard, she whispered. He looked up from his phone, saw her face, followed her gaze. Someone was in my apartment, Rachel said, the realization crawling over her skin like insects. Before we got here, while I was at the diner. Richard moved to the laptop, examined it without touching. The screen was dark, but the angle was wrong. Positioned to face the room, not the desk. Like a camera. They were watching, Richard said. Or recording. Or both. He turned to Rachel, his face grim. Are you certain the journal is everything? No copies? No photos? No backup. I never even read it before tonight, Rachel said. I couldn't. Then we need to assume Vincent already knows what's in here. Richard grabbed her backpack, threw it over his shoulder. The question is, what's his next move? As if an answer, Rachel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. Last chance. $1 million. Sunrise. Or you become a statistic, like your father. V. Rachel's hands shook as she showed Richard. He read it, his jaw set. We leave now. Out the back. Don't use your car. They'll have it tracked. They were halfway out the door when Rachel remembered something. Turned back. The business card Chen had left on the counter. She picked it up, studied it. Something about it nagged at her. The font. The paper quality. It wasn't like the first card. The fake police badge. This one was real, professional, legitimate. Chin Security Solutions had a website listed. And suddenly Rachel understood. Chin wasn't just muscle. He was a contractor, which meant there was a paper trail. Invoices, contracts, evidence that Vincent Calloway had hired someone to threaten her. She pocketed the card. "What are you doing?" Richard hissed from the doorway. "Insurance," Rachel said. "If they're tracking us, let's give them something to track." The drive to Boston took 5 hours through darkness that felt alive with threat. Richard drove, checking mirrors compulsively. Rachel sat passenger side, the journal open in her lap, reading by the faint glow of her phone's flashlight. What she found made the air in the car feel thick, unbreathable. Her father hadn't just documented corporate fraud. He'd documented genocide by negligence. Page after page revealed how Callaway Industries had poisoned entire neighborhoods. Cost-cutting measures that dumped chemical waste into groundwater. Environmental violations ignored through bribes. Safety equipment eliminated to improve profit margins. Her father had visited schools in neighborhoods near Callaway factories, had documented children with cancer at rates 5 times the national average, had interviewed mothers whose babies were born with defects, fathers who developed rare diseases, elderly residents who'd lived in the same house for 50 years and watched everyone around them sicken and die. "I thought corporate fraud was the story," her father had written in 1998. "The real story is genocide by negligence." Robert Calloway knows. Richard knows. They all know. And they choose profit over human life every single day. Rachel looked at Richard, her anger a physical weight in her chest. "You knew." Richard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Not all of it, but enough. I signed off on cost-cutting measures that eliminated safety protocols. I told myself it was business. I told myself we couldn't afford to maintain expensive equipment and stay competitive. People died because of you." Rachel's voice was flat, empty. "Yes." Richard's answer came without hesitation. "And I have to live with that. Every day, every face I saw at corporate events, every worker I passed in the factories. I knew I traded their safety for my family's wealth. This is my chance to make it right. Making it right doesn't bring them back." "No, it doesn't." Richard glanced at her, his face haggard in the dashboard lights. "But it stops it from continuing. It holds people accountable. It tells the truth. That's all we can do now." Rachel wanted to hate him, wanted to throw open the car door and walk away from all of this. But her father's journal was in her lap, and walking away would mean his 30 years meant nothing. They arrived in Boston at 4:30 a.m. The city was just beginning to wake, garbage trucks rumbling, early shift workers trudging to bus stops, the sky lightening from black to deep blue. Patricia Whitmore's office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone in Back Bay. She met them at the door, 50-something, silver-streaked hair pulled back, eyes that had seen every kind of corporate evil and stopped being surprised. She took the journal without a word, spread it across her conference table, and read. Her face grew grimmer with each page. "This is RICO predicate territory," she finally said, her voice carrying the weight of prosecutorial experience. "We're talking decades of federal prison for everyone involved. Conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, environmental crimes. If even half of this is verified, you've handed me the biggest corporate criminal case in Pennsylvania history." "But," Richard prompted, because there was always a but. "But this is documentary evidence compiled by one man over 30 years. Defense attorneys will argue it's fabricated, biased, collected illegally. We need corroboration, living witnesses, digital records, something beyond a journal that could theoretically be manufactured." Rachel's hope, just beginning to form, crumbled. "So it's not enough. It's a start." Patricia flipped to a page, pointed. "Your father mentions a verification package multiple times. Safety deposit box? Storage unit? Some kind of backup?" Rachel shook her head. "He never mentioned anything like that to me." "Thomas was meticulous," Richard said. "He wouldn't compile evidence this damaging without securing backup. It's somewhere." Rachel closed her eyes, trying to remember. Her father's final days in the hospital. The morphine had made him confused, rambling. He'd said things that hadn't made sense. Or had they? Locker 247. Rachel said suddenly. Penn Station. Your birthday. Everything you need. Patricia and Richard both stared at her. He said that in the hospital. I thought it was delirium. Old memories surfacing. Rachel's heart hammered. But what if it wasn't? That's not delirium, Patricia said slowly. That's a dying man giving you a key. Patricia's phone rang. She glanced at it, answered, and her face went white. Turn on the news. Channel 7. Richard found the remote. The TV flickered to life, showing a news anchor with that particular expression they reserved for tragedy. Breaking news from Philadelphia. An explosion at an apartment building in South Philadelphia has left one casualty. Fire officials are on scene at the 1600 block of Morris Street, where residents reported a massive blast just after 5 a.m. The camera cut to Rachel's building, or what was left of it. The second floor, her floor, was gone, blown outward, flames licking at exposed beams. Emergency vehicles clustered like flies on a wound. Police suspect a natural gas leak, the reporter continued. But arson investigators are already on scene. The casualty has not yet been identified, but neighbors report a young woman lived in the affected unit. Rachel couldn't breathe, couldn't process. Her home, everything she owned. Vincent's different approach, Richard said, his voice hollow. He's sending a message. Penn Station, Philadelphia felt different in daylight. Dangerous. Every face could be Vincent's eyes. Every stranger a potential threat. But they had no choice. The locker was here, and whatever her father had hidden might be the only thing keeping Rachel alive. The station hummed with Thursday morning commuters, briefcases and coffee cups, people absorbed in their phones, their destinations, their ordinary problems. None of them knew that a woman walking past them carried evidence that could topple an empire. Rachel's hands shook as she approached locker 247. The number felt significant now, weighted with meaning. Her birthday, July 12, 1989. July 12th, 89. Her father had chosen it deliberately, ensured she'd be the only one who could open it. The combination lock clicked open on the second try. Inside sat a metal document box, smaller than a shoebox, remarkably ordinary for something worth killing over. Rachel lifted it out. Heavy, substantial. She carried it to a corner bench where Richard waited, his body angled to watch the entrances, the exits, the flow of people. She opened the box. 8 USB drives sat nestled in foam, each labeled in her father's careful handwriting. 1985 to 1993, 1994 to 2002, 2003 to 2010, 2011 to 2016. Decades of evidence compressed into drives smaller than her thumb. Beneath them, photographs. Robert Calloway, older, harder than Richard, standing with men who radiated violence. Expensive suits couldn't hide what they were. Rachel recognized one face from news reports. Anthony DeLuca, alleged Philadelphia mob boss, currently serving 20 years in federal prison. Oh God, Richard breathed, seeing the photos. Robert was in deeper than I thought. Signed confessions came next, each notarized, each from former Calloway employees. I, Michael Torres, hereby testify that I was instructed by Robert Calloway to falsify safety inspection reports. Page after page of people choosing truth over self-preservation. Audio cassette sat at the bottom, ancient technology labeled in fading ink. Board meeting, August 1987. Discussion of environmental violations. Phone call, Robert to Inspector Morrison, March 1991. And one envelope sealed with wax, addressed in her father's handwriting. For Rachel. Rachel's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside, 3 pages of lined paper covered front and back in the script she'd grown up seeing. The handwriting that had promised her better futures that never came. She read aloud, her voice breaking within the first paragraph. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for so many things, but mostly I'm sorry for leaving you with this burden. Richard stood, moved away to give her privacy. But Rachel kept reading loud enough for him to hear. He deserved to hear this. All of it. I couldn't be Thomas Calloway and live with myself. I couldn't watch my brother destroy lives and call it business. I couldn't cash checks written in other people's blood. So I became David Morgan. I became invisible. And from invisibility I watched. I documented. I waited for the moment when the truth would matter more than my silence. Tears blurred Rachel's vision. She wiped them away, kept reading. I know what I took from you. The private schools you should have attended. The college fund that never existed. The stability every child deserves. I robbed you of comfort because I chose justice over your future. That's unforgivable. I don't ask you to forgive it. But I need you to understand the families I documented, the neighborhoods poisoned, the workers whose lungs filled with chemicals because safety equipment was too expensive. They had children too. They had daughters who deserved futures. And Robert Calloway took those futures without hesitation, without remorse, year after year after year. I couldn't stop him while wearing his name, but as David Morgan, invisible and insignificant, I could witness. I could document. I could build a case so complete that money couldn't bury it. Rachel's throat closed. She forced herself to continue. You have a choice I never gave myself, Rachel. To speak or to remain silent. Either choice is valid. Either choice is yours. If you choose silence, take the money Vincent will inevitably offer. Live the life I couldn't give you. I'll understand. If you choose to speak, know that the evidence in this box will destroy them. Completely, irreversibly. The final paragraph broke her. I loved you more than I loved justice. That's why I waited until I had nothing left to lose. I documented everything, secured backup after backup. And only when I knew my heart was failing did I make plans to act. I didn't want to leave you alone in a world where the Calloways could reach you. But my body made that choice for me. I hope you can forgive me for choosing what mattered over what was easy. You're stronger than I ever was. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. Always. Dad. Rachel folded the letter, pressed it against her chest. Grief and pride warred inside her, neither winning. Her father had sacrificed everything. For strangers. For principle. For a justice that might never come. Richard stood at the window, his back to her, shoulders shaking. When he spoke, his voice was raw. And I took everything. Built my life on his sacrifice. Told myself I was just doing business while my brother gave up his name, his family, his daughter's future. He turned, and tears tracked down his face. How do you live with that? You don't, Rachel said simply. You just carry it. She pulled out her phone, called Patricia. Put it on speaker. Tell me you found something. Patricia said, without preamble. USB drives, 8 of them. Decades of evidence. Plus photographs, confessions, audio recordings. Rachel's voice steadied as she listed them. Everything my father documented, digitized and backed up. Silence on the line. Then, Rachel. This is enough to dismantle Calloway Industries completely. Federal RICO charges. State environmental crimes. Civil suits from victims' families. We're talking about the biggest corporate criminal case in Pennsylvania history. Hope flickered. Fragile and dangerous. Are you sure? I've been a prosecutor for 23 years. I've never seen a case this documented. Patricia's voice carried absolute certainty. We meet with the FBI Philadelphia field office tomorrow morning. Tonight, we secure copies, cloud storage, trusted journalists, multiple locations. Then we arrange protective custody. And then? Rachel asked. Then you become the face of this. David Morgan's daughter, bringing her father's truth to light. Vincent won't be able to touch you once this goes public. The spotlight protects. Relief flooded through Rachel, so intensely her legs went weak. They'd done it. Her father's 30 years of sacrifice would finally matter. Justice was coming. Richard stepped close, placed a hand on her shoulder. I'll testify. Everything I know, everything I signed off on, every corner we cut. Full cooperation. Patricia's voice softened. Richard, you're aware that means prison time? Yes. No hesitation. It's the least I owe Thomas. They spent the afternoon securing the evidence. Cloud uploads to 3 separate services. Encrypted copies sent to journalists Patricia trusted. Physical backups and safety deposit boxes across 2 states. By 11 p.m., the evidence was untouchable, spread too widely to destroy. Patricia arranged a safe house, a hotel room under a corporate count. Paid in cash, no names attached. Rachel and Richard checked in separately, minutes apart, taking different elevators. Room 847. Queen bed, generic art, the kind of space designed to be forgotten. Rachel collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed. For the first time in 2 days, she could breathe. Really breathe. Vincent couldn't reach them here. Tomorrow, the FBI. Tomorrow, justice. Through the window, she watched Richard step outside to take a call. Probably Patricia, with final arrangements. His silhouette was dark against the parking lot lights. But something in his posture made Rachel's newly relaxed muscles tense again. Richard stood differently when he thought no one was watching. Less hunched, less burdened. His face, illuminated by his phone screen, showed an expression Rachel had never seen. Calculating, cold, satisfied. He glanced back toward her window. Rachel didn't move, didn't breathe. He couldn't see her in the darkened room, but she saw everything. Watched him end the call, check something on his screen, then deliberately compose his face, pulling on grief like a mask, before turning back toward the hotel entrance. Rachel's realization came with sickening clarity. Something was very, very wrong. Rachel closed her eyes to slits, keeping her breathing deep and even. Through barely parted lids, she watched Richard enter the room, moving with careful silence like a man who thought she was sleeping. He stood at the window for a long moment, looking out at the night. Then he reached into his jacket, not the pocket he'd been using, but an interior one she hadn't noticed, and withdrew a second phone. Not his iPhone with a cracked screen. This one was sleek, new, completely unfamiliar. He typed with his thumbs, the screen glow painting his face in sharp angles. Rachel couldn't see what he wrote, but she could see his expression. Focused, methodical, nothing like the grieving brother who'd broken down reading Thomas's letter. He finished typing, hit send, waited. A response came almost immediately. Richard read it, nodded once, then powered the phone down and tucked it back into his hidden pocket. When he turned from the window, his face had rearranged itself into exhaustion and worry. The mask was back in place, but Rachel had seen beneath it. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Richard's sudden appearance at the diner. Not coincidence, but surveillance paying off. His convenient story about searching for Thomas. Believable because it was partially true, hiding deeper lies. His urgency to find the journal, not to preserve his brother's legacy, but to destroy it. It was never about redemption. It was about covering up. Rachel sat up. Who were you texting? Richard startled convincingly, his hand moving to his chest. You're awake. I thought you were sleeping. Who were you texting? She repeated. Patricia. Just coordinating tomorrow's FBI meeting. The lie came smoothly while practiced. Really? Rachel stood, moved toward him. Because you didn't pull out the phone you've been using all day. You pulled out a phone I've never seen before. Richard's face went carefully neutral. I have 2 phones, work and personal. Show me the text you just sent. Rachel, you're exhausted, paranoid, understandable given everything. But show me. Her voice cut through his deflection like a blade. Silence stretched between them. Something in Richard's eyes shifted, hardened. The mask didn't crack so much as dissolve, revealing what had been underneath all along. I didn't know if the evidence existed, he said finally, his voice losing its careful warmth. For 30 years, I thought Thomas had died without compiling it. The journal was a rumor, a fear I carried but never confirmed. When you mentioned it in the diner, I saw a chance, find it before Vincent did, destroy it, and this threat forever. The truth felt like a punch to the stomach. You never wanted justice. I wanted to protect what we built. Richard moved toward the minibar, poured himself scotch from a bottle he'd bought earlier. His hands were steady now, no trembling. Yes, it started with theft and fraud. But look at what Callaway Industries became. 18,000 employees, factories across 5 states. We've funded schools, hospitals, scholarship programs. We've lifted entire neighborhoods out of poverty. With money stolen from families you destroyed. Rachel's voice shook with rage. The past is past. Those victims are dead. Richard drank, his eyes cold over the rim of the glass. But the workers at Callaway Industries, their mortgages, their kids' college funds, their retirement accounts, they're alive. They're innocent. Is it just to destroy their futures for crimes they didn't commit? The argument landed wrong because it wasn't entirely wrong. Rachel thought of her own father, working Callaway's assembly line. He'd have lost his job too if the company collapsed. Thousands of families caught in the blast radius of corporate justice. But her father had chosen truth anyway, had sacrificed his own security for something bigger. "Give me the USB drives," Richard said, setting down his glass. "Walk away. I'll make sure you're compensated. $2 million untraceable. Enough to build any life you want. And if I don't?" Richard's expression turned genuinely sad. "Then I make a different call. To Vincent. He's already eliminated loose ends. What's one more?" Rachel's blood turned to ice. "You're threatening to kill me. I'm giving you the chance my brother never took, to survive. To choose pragmatism over principle." Richard stepped closer. Thomas chose his morals over his family, over his daughter's future. "Look where it got him. Broke, alone, having robbed you of everything you deserved. Is that integrity, Rachel? Or is that selfishness?" The question hit harder than Rachel wanted to admit. How many nights had she thought exactly that? How many times had she resented her father's obsession, his inability to just let things go and focus on giving her a normal life? "He died with his integrity intact," Rachel said, but her voice wavered. "He died leaving you with nothing." Richard's voice turned cruel. "No money, no education, no prospects, just medical debt and a dead-end job. Some legacy." Rachel thought of her father's letter. Either choice is valid. Either choice is yours. He'd given her permission to choose herself, to take the money and walk away. But he'd also shown her what mattered more than easy choices. "You're right," Rachel said slowly. "I've been thinking about this all wrong." Richard's shoulders relaxed slightly. Victory flickered across his face. Rachel reached for the document box on the nightstand, pulled out her phone instead. "That's why I've been recording this conversation since I saw you texting that second phone." She held up her phone. "Hit play." Richard's voice emerged from the speaker. "I wanted to protect what we built, find it before Vincent did, destroy it, and this threat forever. I already uploaded it to cloud storage," Rachel continued, watching the color drain from Richard's face, "with instructions to release to every news outlet in Pennsylvania if anything happens to me." The transformation was instant. Richard's careful control shattered. Rage contorted his features into something ugly, unrecognizable. "You stupid girl." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "You have no idea what you've just done." He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise. Rachel tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. "Your father's heart attack wasn't natural." The words came out like venom. "Vincent had him killed. Hired a specialist who induced cardiac arrest. Looks completely natural, untraceable. I found out after it happened. I've been protecting you by keeping you close, making Vincent think I had you controlled. Now you've made yourself his next target." The room tilted. Rachel's knees buckled, but Richard's grip kept her upright. "Father, murdered. Not stress, not natural. Murdered for what he knew." "All of this," Rachel whispered. "He died for evidence. I almost gave up. We can still fix this." Richard's urgency returned, his grip loosening slightly. "Delete the recording. Give me the drives. I'll protect you from Vincent. I'll make sure you're safe, comfortable, taken care of. But you have to trust me." "Trust you?" Rachel laughed, the sound hollow and broken. "By making me complicit in covering up my father's murder? By keeping you alive?" Richard shook her once, sharp and desperate. "Vincent doesn't play games. He doesn't make idle threats. If you expose this, you're dead. Do you understand? Dead. Like Thomas. Like the other 3 who try to contact me. Like everyone who's ever threatened the Calloway empire." Rachel pulled free, back toward the door. Her phone stayed raised, still recording. "No, Rachel, please." Richard's voice cracked, genuine desperation bleeding through. "I can't protect you if you do this. I can't stop what Vincent will do." "Then don't." Rachel's hand found the doorknob. "I'm done with Calloway's protecting me. I'm done with choosing easy over right." She turned the knob. The door exploded inward, sending Rachel sprawling. She hit the floor hard, her phone skittering under the bed. Vincent Calloway stepped through the doorway like he owned it. 32 years old, handsome in that careful way wealth could buy. Expensive suit hanging perfectly on his frame. But his eyes were empty. Reptilian. The eyes of someone who'd never felt empathy and wouldn't recognize in others. Behind him, Chin entered with 2 other men. Large, professional, the kind of people who solved problems with violence. Vincent surveyed the room. Richard frozen by the window, Rachel on the floor, and smiled without humor. Touching reunion, he said, his voice carrying Princeton education and absolute contempt. Uncle Richard, I'm disappointed. You were supposed to handle this quietly. Richard straightened. Vincent, she's family. Thomas's daughter. We can't. Can't what? Vincent interrupted. Can't protect the empire that supported this family for 40 years? Can't neutralize a threat that could destroy 18,000 jobs? Please, Uncle Richard, spare me the sudden crisis of conscience. Rachel pushed herself to her knees. Blood trickled from where her temple had hit the corner of the nightstand. You killed my father. Vincent looked at her like she was a stain on his carpet. Your father was a traitor who spent 30 years attempting industrial espionage. He committed crimes, broke into private property, stole confidential documents. I simply prevented further damage. You murdered him. I resolved the business problem. Vincent's tone suggested discussing the weather. And now I'm resolving another one. Chun moved with professional efficiency, confiscating Rachel's phone from under the bed, the document box from the nightstand, patting down both her and Richard for additional devices. His two associates blocked the door and window. No escape routes remained. Vincent settled into the room's single chair like it was a throne. Everyone relax. No one needs to die tonight. She's innocent, Richard said, finding his voice. Let her go. I'll take responsibility. Vincent's laugh was cold. Innocent? She's been plotting to destroy our family for days, collecting evidence, recording conversations. He gestured to the confiscated phone. Hardly innocent behavior, Uncle Richard. She's your cousin. Richard's voice cracked. Thomas's daughter. Your blood. Biology isn't loyalty. Vincent examined his manicured nails. Bored. My father understood that. You seem to be struggling with the concept. Rachel found her footing, stood despite the room spinning. My father spent 30 years documenting your crimes. You think killing me makes that disappear? No. Vincent smiled, and it was worse than his anger. But I have a better plan than simple elimination. Would you like to hear it? He didn't wait for an answer. The evidence your father collected, impressive work, truly, has a fatal flaw. Half of it is inadmissible in court, gathered without warrants, recorded without consent, stolen from private property. Vincent leaned forward, elbows on knees. My legal team has been preparing for this contingency since 2008, when we first suspected Thomas might still be alive. You are lying, Rachel said, but doubt crept in. Am I? Chin. Explain to Ms. Morgan the legal technicalities of evidence obtained through corporate espionage. Chun spoke without inflection. Anything your father obtained while trespassing on Callaway property is inadmissible. Any recordings made without all parties' consent violate Pennsylvania wiretapping laws. Documents he copied without authorization are stolen property. Even his testimony would be impeachable given his history of corporate espionage and identity fraud. Vincent nodded. If this ever went to trial, which it won't, we'd drown you in motions, appeals, technicalities. Best case scenario for you. Years of litigation, bankruptcy from legal fees, and maybe, some fine to the company. We'd survive. You wouldn't. Rachel's hope, so fragile and new, crumbled. You're going to get away with it. We already have. Vincent stood, straightened his suit jacket. But here's what will definitely happen if you proceed. I'll sue you personally for theft of corporate documents. I'll have you arrested for breaking into Callaway facilities. Your father didn't just document our alleged crimes. He committed actual crimes to do it. Trespassing, theft, surveillance without consent. He circled her slowly. Predator assessing prey. I'll make you the criminal. I'll bury you in litigation. Every penny you'll ever make will go to my lawyers. Every job prospect will evaporate when employers Google your name and see corporate espionage and convicted thief. You're bluffing, Rachel said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Vincent gestured to Chun. Show her the preliminary filing. Chun pulled out a tablet, displayed legal documents. Rachel's name featured prominently in the header. Callaway Industries versus Rachel Morgan. Civil suit for theft of trade secrets and corporate espionage. Pre-drafted, Vincent said. ready to file the moment you make this public. But I'm not without mercy. I'm offering you a choice. He pulled a document from his jacket. Non-disclosure agreement. You sign it, take $5 million, and disappear. Move to California. Start over. Forget you ever heard the name Calloway. Rachel stared at the paper. $5 million. More money than her father had earned in his entire life. Your father wanted you to have a better life, Vincent continued, his voice almost gentle. I'm offering it to you. Take the money. Walk away. Live. And if I don't, Vincent's gentleness evaporated. Then you become a convicted criminal with no money, no job prospects, no future. And eventually, when the spotlight fades and people stop caring about you, you have an accident, just like your father. Richard stepped forward. Vincent, that's enough. She understands. Do you? Vincent turned his cold gaze to Rachel. Do you really understand what you're choosing? Poverty and fear for a justice that will never come? Or comfort and safety in exchange for silence? Rachel looked at Richard. Are you going to let him do this? Richard's face was hollow. I'm sorry. I truly am. But Vincent's right. The legal reality is complicated. The final betrayal landed with quiet devastation. Richard chose family over redemption, blood over conscience, the easy path over the right one. Rachel was utterly alone. You have until 6 a.m. to decide, Vincent said, checking his watch. Sign the NDA and take the money, or I file a lawsuit and make you a criminal. After that, the generous offer expires. Chin took Rachel's arm, not rough, but implacable. For your safety, you'll wait in the adjoining room. They led her through a connecting door into a smaller room. Chun locked it from the outside. She was trapped with nothing but her thoughts and the impossible weight of her choice. Rachel collapsed onto the bed, grief and rage warring inside her until she couldn't distinguish between them. Her father had died for this, had given up everything, and the system was designed to protect the people who'd killed him. She pulled his letter from her pocket. She'd kept it close, reading it whenever doubt crept in. Now she unfolded it again, desperate for guidance. I hope you can forgive me for choosing what mattered over what was easy. The words blurred through her tears. But as she blinked them clear, something caught her eye. Below the signature, in handwriting so small she'd missed it before a postscript. P.S. If they find everything, remember, the real evidence isn't in the box. It's in the place where we shared our best memories. You know where? Rachel sat up slowly, her heart hammering. The place where we shared our best memories. Not the diner. Not their apartment. Not Penn Station. The Philadelphia Museum of Art. The iconic steps where Rocky ran in the movies. Where her father had taken her every birthday since she could walk. Where they'd sit on the 47th step. Her birth year added up and eat packed lunches and talk about life and dreams and the difference between right and easy. Her father had hidden something there. Something the Calloways didn't know about. Something that could actually stop them. Their real smoking gun. Rachel pressed her ear to the door, listening. Vincent's voice carried from the other room, talking on his phone. Richard murmured responses. Chen's footsteps paced. She had until 6 a.m., 5 hours to escape, get to the museum, and find whatever her father had hidden. 5 hours to choose what mattered over what was easy. Rachel looked at the window. 3rd floor, but there was a fire escape. She started calculating. 3:47 a.m. Rachel stood at the window, measuring distances with her eyes. 3rd floor, maybe 30 feet to the alley below. The fire escape ended 1 floor up, budget hotel cost-cutting. But bedsheets tied together had worked in movies. Maybe they'd work in real life. Through the door, she heard Chen's footsteps pacing, heard Vincent's voice on his phone, talking to lawyers probably, preparing the legal assault that would bury her. Heard Richard's silence, which somehow hurt worse than anything Vincent had said. Rachel stripped the bed methodically. 2 sheets, knotted at the corners, with knots her father had taught her during a camping trip she'd almost forgotten. Square knots hold under tension, he'd said. They save lives. She tied one end to the radiator beneath the window, tested it with her full weight. The radiator groaned, but held. The makeshift rope dangled into darkness. Rachel pressed her ear to the door one final time. Chen's footsteps had stopped. Silence. Then the faint glow of phone light under the door. He was sitting down, scrolling, distracted. Now or never. She opened the window inch by careful inch. The old frame squeaked, but Vincent's voice in the other room covered the sound. Cold October air rushed in, carrying the smell of the city waking up. Rachel climbed onto the windowsill, gripped the sheet rope, and lowered herself into the void. Her hands burned immediately. The cotton twisted, bit into her palms, and her arms shook with the strain of controlling her descent. Don't look down. Just hand under hand, feet braced against the brick wall, muscles screaming. Halfway down, the knot between sheets began to slip. Rachel's heart stopped. She froze, pressed against the wall, praying the knot would hold. Above her, a light came on in the room she'd escaped from. Chen had discovered her gone. The knot held, barely. Rachel dropped the final 8 feet, landing hard in the alley. Her right ankle rolled. White-hot pain shooting of her leg. She bit back a scream, forced herself upright, limping but mobile. Behind her, Chen's voice echoed from the window. She's gone. Ali sighed. Rachel ran. The Philadelphia Museum of Art stood 4 miles away, too far to run on a twisted ankle. But a bus stopped 2 blocks over. Early morning route serving hospital workers and bakers. Rachel caught it with seconds to spare, collapsing into a seat, her chest heaving. 4:23 a.m. The museum loomed ahead, its neoclassical columns dark against the lightning sky. Closed until 10 a.m. But Rachel knew another way in. She circled to the service entrance, found the window her father had shown her years ago during a thunderstorm. They'd been caught outside during a sudden downpour, and David had produced a pocket knife, carefully jimmied the old lock, ushered her inside. Emergency only, he'd said with a wink. Our secret. Rachel used a rock this time. The glass shattered with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the pre-dawn quiet. Alarm bells immediately began wailing. 5 minutes, maybe less, before police arrived. She ran through the darkened museum, her footsteps echoing off marble floors, past priceless art she couldn't see, through the main entrance, out to the famous steps. The rocky steps stretched before her, iconic and imposing. 72 steps total, each one identical stone. The place where we shared our best memories. But which step? Rachel's mind raced. They'd always sat on the same one. Her father had been specific about it. The 47th step, she whispered aloud. My birth year, 1989, add the digits. 1 plus 9 plus 8 plus 9 is equal to 27. She counted from the bottom. 27 steps up. 27 from the top. The 47th step. Rachel knelt, ran her hands over the stone. Nothing obvious. But when she pressed hard on the right edge, something shifted. Loose mortar crumbled away, revealing a hollow behind the stone facing. Inside, a waterproof bag, sealed tight, preserved through years of weather. Rachel ripped it open. Another small notebook fell into her hands, along with 2 more USB drives. The notebook's first page read, Master Index, Evidence Locations, Living Witnesses, Financial Trail. Her father had created a roadmap to destroy the Callaways completely. Every piece of hidden evidence, every backup location, every person who could testify, names and addresses of 12 former Callaway executives willing to trade testimony for immunity, offshore account numbers, proving bribery chains that reached into federal government. One page was titled in red ink, For Federal Prosecutors, Immunity Witnesses. With this, Rachel breathed, Vincent can't lawyer his way out. Sirens approached, police responding to the alarm. But behind them, a different sound. An engine racing too fast, tires squealing. Chen's black sedan screeched to a stop at the base of the steps. Rachel ran, not down toward him, but sideways, across the museum lawn toward Fairmount Park. Her ankle screamed protest, but she pushed through. The evidence clutched her chest. Chun emerged from a car, pursued on foot. He was faster, trained, uninjured. Within a minute, he'd closed half the distance. Rachel cut through the park, trying to use trees for cover. But Chun anticipated every turn. He was hurting her, she realized, pushing her toward the river. The Schuylkill River appeared through the trees. Rachel reached its edge, trapped. Water behind her, Chun approaching from the front. Police sirens growing closer from both sides. Chin stopped 10 feet away, breathing hard but controlled. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Give me the evidence. Rachel held the waterproof bag over the water. One more step, and it's gone forever. I drop it in the river, it's lost. All of it. Chin froze. He couldn't risk losing what she held. Vincent would destroy him. They stood in standoff, dawn breaking pink over the river, both knowing this moment would determine everything. Call Vincent, Rachel said, her voice steadier than she felt. Tell him I want to negotiate, on my terms. The same booth where this had started 2 nights ago. The same fluorescent lights humming overhead. The same smell of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. But everything had changed. Rachel sat on one side, the waterproof bag on the table before her. Vincent sat across from her, fury barely contained beneath his expensive suit. Richard stood by the window, looking older than his 60 years. Chin leaned against the counter, his allegiance suddenly uncertain. Patricia Whitmore's voice came through Rachel's phone on speaker. Everyone's present? Good. Ms. Morgan, you have the floor. Everyone hears the truth first, Rachel said. Then we decide what happens next. She pulled out one of the new USB drives, plugged it into her phone, and played an audio file dated August 1985. 2 voices emerged from the tinny speaker. Both male, both cultured, both casual in their discussion of destroying a life. Thomas is becoming a problem. Robert Calloway's voice, imperious and cold. He found the Henderson files. He knows we stole the patent. Richard's voice, younger but recognizable, worried. Then we force him out. He walks away from the family. Or we could destroy him. Completely. Family or not. What if he goes to the authorities? A pause. Then Robert's voice, chilling in its matter-of-fact tone. Then he has an accident. Make it look natural. I have people who can arrange these things. Richard's face crumbled as he heard his own voice from 33 years ago. Oh God, he whispered. Robert planned to kill Thomas from the beginning. I thought he was just trying to scare him. I didn't think. You knew he was serious. Rachel cut him off. You just chose not to believe it, because believing would have made you complicit. Richard said nothing. Couldn't. Rachel pulled out another file. My father didn't die of natural causes. We all know that now. But here's what you don't know. He discovered Vincent was continuing the pattern. Patents stolen in 2015, 2016. New families destroyed. New evidence compiled. She played another recording. This one from March 2016. Background noise of a factory floor. 2 voices arguing. I know what you did to the Morrison design. Same thing your father did to Henderson. David Morgan's voice, controlled despite obvious fear. My father built this empire. I'm just maintaining it. Vincent's voice cold. By stealing from people who trust you? By poisoning neighborhoods? By killing anyone who gets in your way? You've been the ghost in our family for 30 years, Thomas. Time to actually become one. Silence in the diner. Vincent's face had gone carefully blank, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. You killed her, Rachel said. Your own uncle, my father. Vincent didn't deny it. He was going to destroy everything. Thousands of jobs, shareholder value, family legacy. I didn't want to kill him. He forced my hand. The sociopathy was stunning. Vincent truly saw murder as just another business decision. No different from firing an underperforming employee. Rachel turned to Chin. Tell them. Chin had been silent until now, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. I administered the injection. Potassium chloride. Made it look like cardiac arrest. Untraceable unless you know what to look for. Why are you confessing? Vincent hissed. Chin pulled out his own phone. Held up. Because I've been recording everything you've ever told me to do. Every order. Every payment. Every threat. Insurance policy, Vincent. You're not the only one who plans ahead. Vincent's world was collapsing in real time. His enforcer had turned. His uncle was breaking. The evidence was overwhelming. I'll testify, Chin said to Patricia's phone. Everything. But I want immunity. Patricia's voice came crisp and professional. That can be arranged. I'll testify too, Richard said, his voice broken. All of it. What we did in the 80s. What I knew. How I covered it up. Everything. Vincent stood, his composure finally cracking. You'll never convict me. My lawyers will tear this apart. Inadmissible evidence, illegal recordings. With Chen's testimony as a cooperating witness? Patricia interrupted. With Richard's cooperation? With Thomas's 30 years of documentation corroborated by living witnesses? You're going to federal prison for the rest of your life, Mr. Calloway. The diner door opened. Philadelphia police entered first, followed by FBI agents in dark suits carrying badges and purpose. Patricia had arranged everything, been feeding evidence to prosecutors since Boston. The case was already built. Vincent Calloway, the lead FBI agent, said, "You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, corporate fraud, and obstruction of justice." Vincent didn't resist, just stood there as they cuffed him, his face finally showing something real. Fear. Chen was arrested next, but placed immediately in protective custody. Cooperating witness, valuable testimony, immunity, deal pending. Richard stepped toward Rachel one final time. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but your father, Thomas, would be proud of you." "Don't." Rachel's voice cut like glass. "You don't get to speak for him." "You're right. I don't." Richard's shoulders sagged. "But I can spend the rest of my life making it right. Testifying. Exposing everything. It won't bring him back, but..." "Sir, we need you to come with us." An FBI agent gestured toward the door. Richard nodded, accepted responsibility with something resembling grace. He turned to Rachel one last time. "Your father was the best of us. The only one who stayed good. Remember that." Then he was gone, led away in handcuffs, leaving Rachel alone in the diner where this had all begun. The Philadelphia federal courthouse had never seen a trial like this one. 3 months of testimony, 47 witnesses, mountains of evidence spanning 3 decades. The gallery packed every single day with journalists, victims' families, and people who just needed to see justice happen. Vincent Calloway sat stone-faced through it all, his expensive lawyers objecting and maneuvering and ultimately failing. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Guilty on all counts: murder, conspiracy, racketeering, corporate fraud, environmental crimes that had poisoned entire neighborhoods. The judge showed no mercy. Life in prison without possibility of parole. Richard Calloway received 15 years, reduced for his cooperation. He'd testified for 6 days straight, holding nothing back. Every patent stolen, every bribe paid, every corner cut that led to deaths. He accepted his sentence with something resembling grace. His only request that he be allowed to serve his time doing prison education programs. Chun got 8 years, also reduced for testimony. His detailed records of Vincent's orders had been the prosecution's backbone. Without them, Vincent's lawyers might have created reasonable doubt. With them, the case was airtight. But the trial was only the beginning of the reckoning. Calloway Industries was dismantled piece by piece. Assets liquidated. A federal judge oversaw the creation of an $847 million restitution fund for victims and their families. The Henderson family, whose patriarch had committed suicide after Robert Calloway destroyed their business, received $15 million. Families whose children had developed cancer from Calloway's environmental violations received lifetime medical care funding. The 18,000 employees, the innocent workers Richard had used to justify his complicity, were purchased by an ethical investment firm committed to fair labor practices and environmental responsibility. Jobs were preserved, benefits maintained. The company that had built itself on stolen dreams was transformed into something that might actually do good. Rachel Morgan received $12 million as a whistleblower reward under federal statute. She paid off every cent of medical debt within a week, enrolled at Columbia's journalism school within a month. Her area of focus: investigative reporting on corporate crime. She created the Thomas Calloway Foundation with half the remaining money. Its mission: fund investigative journalism and provide legal support for whistleblowers too poor to fight back against corporate retaliation. The foundation's motto, taken from her father's journal: "The truth always matters." But the most profound vindication came in unexpected form. A New York publisher had approached Rachel during the trial, asking about her father's journal. Not just the evidence, the story, the 30 years of documentation. Yes, but also the man behind it. The factory worker who'd given up everything to bear witness. The book was published 6 months after Vincent's sentencing. The Invisible Witness, 30 Years Inside a Criminal Empire by David Morgan, with introduction by Rachel Morgan. It became a bestseller within 2 weeks. Critical acclaim followed. The New York Times called it the most important work of investigative journalism published this decade. Universities assigned it in ethics and business law courses. Documentary filmmakers competed for rights. Rachel had written the introduction through tears and pride in equal measure. She told her father's story, not just Thomas Calloway, who walked away from wealth, but David Morgan, who'd worked assembly lines and lived in poverty and documented horrors while raising a daughter alone. He never got to see his name in print the way he dreamed. But his words, his truth, finally reached the world. On a cold April morning, Rachel visited Laurel Hill Cemetery, where her father was buried. The headstone was simple. David Morgan, 1959 to 2016. He chose truth. Rachel knelt, placed the first published copy of his book on the grave. You did it, Dad. You kept your integrity. And it mattered. It mattered so much. For the first time since his death, she could breathe without the weight of unfinished business crushing her chest. The grief remained, would always remain, but it had transformed into something bearable. Pride, purpose, peace. She stayed there for an hour, talking to him the way she used to when she was young and still believed her father could fix anything. Told him about journalism school, about the foundation, about how his courage had inspired thousands of other whistleblowers to come forward with their own stories of corporate malfeasance. Walking back to her car, Rachel found a letter tucked under her windshield wiper. Prison postmark, Federal Correctional Institution in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Richard's handwriting. She sat in her car and read it. Dear Rachel, I know I have no right to contact you. I know my words can't undo the harm I caused, the years I stole from you and your father, the complicity that makes me as guilty as Vincent in all but degree. But I needed you to know something. Thomas once told me that integrity isn't about never making mistakes. It's about what you do after. I'm trying to learn that lesson 30 years too late. I'm testifying in 3 more cases against former Calloway executives. I'm working with the foundation to identify other corporate fraud schemes. I'm teaching ethics courses to other inmates, trying to help them understand what I learned too late. There's no amount of money worth your soul. Thank you for being stronger than I was. Thank you for doing what Thomas raised you to do. Your father would be so proud. Richard. Rachel folded the letter carefully, placed it in her glove compartment. She didn't respond, didn't know if she ever would. Some wounds healed, some just became scars you learned to live with. But she didn't throw it away either. This isn't just a story about a waitress and a billionaire. It's a story about choices. Thomas Calloway chose integrity over wealth, walked away from millions, changed his name, spent 30 years documenting crimes while living in poverty. He chose truth over comfort, justice over family, the hard right over the easy wrong. Rachel Morgan chose justice over security. When offered $5 million to walk away, she chose her father's legacy instead. Risked everything, her life, her future, her peace. Because some things matter more than survival. Richard Calloway chose redemption over pride. 30 years too late, but he chose. Testified against his family, accepted prison, tried to make amends for decades of complicity. It doesn't erase what he did, but it counts for something. Vincent Calloway chose power over humanity, saw murder as a business decision, viewed people as problems to be solved, believed money could buy absolution. He was wrong. Every day, we face smaller versions of these choices. To speak up or stay silent. To do what's easy or what's right. To protect ourselves or protect the truth. What would you have done in Rachel's position? When Vincent offered her $5 million to walk away, would you have taken it? Be honest. Would you have chosen your father's dream or your own survival? Would you have forgiven Richard Calloway? Does cooperation erase decades of complicity? Or is redemption something you earn slowly, painfully, through years of making it right? Comment below. Team Rachel or Team Richard? The American dream promises that hard work and talent will be rewarded. But sometimes the system is rigged. Sometimes the powerful prey on the powerless. Sometimes justice requires sacrifice that feels unbearable. Rachel lost her father. lost 2 years of peace, lost the innocence of believing the world was fundamentally fair. She'll never get those things back, but she gained something too. The knowledge that her father's sacrifice mattered, that truth eventually prevails, that one person, armed with courage and evidence, can topple an empire. If you believe that hidden stories deserve to be told, that the David Morgans of the world deserve to be remembered, subscribe so you never miss another story like this. If you believe integrity matters more than wealth, that some things are worth fighting for even when the odds seem impossible, let me know you're here. Because channels like this exist to remind us of something vital. You don't have to be rich or powerful to change the world. You just have to be brave enough to tell the truth, to document what you see, to refuse to look away when everyone else does. This was a true story. The names have been changed to protect the innocent and prosecute the guilty. But the crimes were real. The courage was real. The justice, hard won, expensive, painful, was real. For more stories that will stay with you long after they end, stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, check out the playlist below. These are the stories that matter.